Welcome to the Dawn to Dusk podcast with your host, Douglas Wood, author of From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. In each episode, Doug interviews distinguished legal professionals who have masterfully navigated their careers from inception to retirement and explores the intricacies of building a successful law practice and transitioning to retirement when the right time comes. Now, let's join Doug for today's insightful discussion.
Welcome to the Dawn to Dusk podcast. I'm your host, Doug Wood. My guest today is Jeff Greenbaum. Jeff has been the managing partner of Frankfurt Kurnit since 2010. The firm was founded in 1977 by 5 New York City lawyers and today has more than 100 lawyers with offices in New York and Los Angeles. Jeff is among the leading advertising and marketing lawyers in the world and has a practice focused on advertising, agencies, advertisers, social media platforms, and technology and more. Jeff earned his BA from Brandeis University and his JD from Columbia University. He also served as a member of the Dean's Advisory Council at the University of Michigan Law School as an adjunct faculty member at Parsons School of Design. He is also the chairman of the Global Advertising Lawyers Alliance, chair of the International Advertising Association's Public Policy Council, and member of the Advisory Council of the Institute of Advertising Ethics. Jeff has twice served as chairman of the jury for the prestigious International Council for Advertising Self-Regulation's Global Awards, and Best Lawyers in America has named him Advertising Lawyer of the Year 3 times. So welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Doug. You can introduce me anytime.
There you go. There you go. So let's start off with who you are, where you're from, why you became a lawyer, and what you find so fascinating about the legal profession.
You know, it's funny. I was an English major in college, and I was really interested in journalism, and I was kind of playing around with how to do all these things involving persuasive writing and persuasion and being engaged in the world. And, I ultimately was persuaded that by LA law that like being a lawyer was the most interesting thing to do. And it was absolutely convinced that I wanted to be a litigator, and was really laser focused in law school on how do I prepare myself for being a litigator. I wanted to go to a great litigation firm. Ultimately, I went to Paul Weiss to be a litigator. It's funny when I after my summer associate year at Paul Weiss, and Paul Weiss offered me a job to come back. They sort of said to me, you should consider being in the corporate department. And, I was like, no, I want to be a litigator. They're like, we really think you should consider, being in the corporate department. I was like, no, I absolutely want to be a litigator. They're like, all right, fine. You could be in the litigation department. And of course, they were right. I didn't want to be a litigator. I had an amazing 4 years at Paul Weiss and was lucky enough to be on this incredible case in Tokyo. And I lived there for about 9 months, which was this incredible experience working with these incredible people on this incredible case. It was kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I knew the case was going to go on for years and years and years. And in fact, I think it went on for a decade. And I realized like I didn't want to go back and be a regular litigator. I didn't want to go back and respond to interrogatories ever again. And I needed to figure out what the next thing was going to be. And I knew that I was interested in intellectual property and the First Amendment and, but I didn't really know what that was going to look like and what that looked like in terms of a career. And I think the real problem I had was I couldn't apply for a job because I was living in Tokyo. Like, how do you interview for jobs when you're living in Tokyo? And I came home one weekend and they would let us come home, to see your families once every month, 6 weeks, something like that. And I was out to brunch with a good friend who was working at Frankfurt at the time. And I was just telling him this story. I was like, look, I love my job. I'm having this incredible experience, but I can never go back and do regular litigation again. And he's like, you want to come be an advertising lawyer? And I was like, sure. And I was like, now tell me what an advertising lawyer is. And literally a month later, I started at Frankfurt Kurnit. And the last, I don't know, 28, 29 years has gone by like that.
Wow. So it's interesting. When I graduated from NYU with my LLM, was in 1977, by the way, when your firm was founded. I had an intellectual property background from NYU, and I didn't know what I know. I didn't want to be a litigator. I wanted to go and be a transactional lawyer, and ended up at Hall Dickler and bumped into Felix Kent, and he said, "You want to be an advertising lawyer?" It's the same story. I said, "Sure. What is that?" And that's how I ended up being an advertising and marketing lawyer as well.
Well, I think one of the things that was really compelling to me about being an advertising lawyer is the amount of lawyering that we do. And I think that, our entertainment lawyers who are, the best in the business do a very specific type of lawyering. And our litigators who are these incredible litigators who are at the center of all these incredible cases are doing these incredible, groundbreaking cases. But the sort of what we do is such a mix of all of the different disciplines. I mean, in any one day, I'm, giving people intellectual property advice and I'm talking about advertising regulation and I'm negotiating various types of deals and I'm involved in, defending some regulatory investigation at the FTC. So, you're sort of doing all of these different things. And I think it really has allowed me to kind of explore all of the different parts of being a lawyer in a way that is really satisfying. I also think one of the things that I found frustrating about being a litigator, and I know some people love this, is every new case you're doing something different, right? First you're on a RICO case, and then you're in a securities class action, and then you're dealing with some international arbitration issue, and some people love that. And I think for me, I really wanted to build an expertise. Like I wanted to focus on some area where I felt like I could go really, really deep and really understand what the issues are and really be somebody who wasn't starting fresh every day, but was really building this a really incredible breadth and depth of understanding of an area. And, I think that that's really what it's been about.
So you came to Frankfurt after 4 years at Paul Weiss. You had no business, I assume, at that point. You had no clients. You had nothing. Would you come in as a partner or an associate?
Associate, I was a fourth year. Yeah, I
Came
was
in
a
as an associate, and I think that's around when we probably met when you were still an associate at Frankfurt at the time when we first bumped into each other at some conference. I forget what it was. I think it was one of the AICP conferences.
well,
In
I, I
any
would
event,
say, but I would say, and this is an important point, which is, when I started as an advertising lawyer, you know, there were really, first of all, it was a very small bar at the time. It's not like it is now where there are all these people who are practicing advertising law, right? I mean, at the time, there were just a couple of firms doing it, but among the people that were doing it, there were really three or four people, right? There were three or four people who were leaders in the area. And, it was immediately obvious to me at this moment when I was a brand new advertising lawyer who those people were, and it was extraordinarily influential to me. I mean, when I saw you and I saw Rick and I saw Ron and I saw a couple of others, I it really helped me think about, even at that very, not knowing anything about developing business, not knowing sort of what my career trajectory was going to take. It was actually the foundation of my strategy to building business, being an advertising lawyer, was looking at you guys, and going, what did they do? What is the image that they're projecting? What is the expertise that they have? How are they doing it? And I'm not just saying this you know, because of how I feel about you or because I'm on this podcast with you, but literally I looked at what you were doing very self-consciously, said, if I'm going to be successful, I need to do what they're doing.
so first of all, thank you for the compliment. But tell our viewers then, okay, there you are. You're looking at all these folks who are building practices or have practices. What were the steps that you took? How did you go from a fourth year associate with no business, brand new advertising lawyer, to being the prestigious lawyer you are today? How did you build that business?
Well, so I would say there's a couple things. I would say the first thing was, you know, I knew that I didn't know a thing, right? I mean, I was a brand new lawyer. I had been a litigator. I had done a bunch of different things, which was good sort of starter training for being a lawyer. But I really understood that the first thing that I needed to do was learn how to be an advertising lawyer. And so, I spent the next several years just never saying no, right? Just never saying no and just saying, the way that I'm going to learn how to do this is I'm going to do as much work as I possibly can, get as much experience as I possibly can, work with as many people as I possibly can, get to know as many clients as I possibly can, and really just build the expertise. I mean, for me, I always felt that I wasn't sure what business development was going to look like or what my career was going to look like, or even if I wanted to be a partner at a law firm, all I knew is the first step is that I had to actually have the there. And so, one of the things I remember most distinctly about my first couple years as an advertising lawyer was not only that I was working all the time. Um, you know, I remember Tom Sells, one of the founders of our firm, came into me in my office at some point in that first couple years and said, "Look, you know, we had to give you a big bonus this year just because, and we don't normally do that, but you just work so many more hours than everybody else. Like we had to recognize that, and it was very intentional, right? I was trying to learn this, and I was trying to get my arms around it. But the other thing that I really remember around that time was that I had this enormous stack of papers next to my bed, and basically, anytime an issue came up, anytime a case came up, anytime something I didn't know or something I didn't understand came up, I'd print it out, I'd print out the cases, I'd print out an article, and I just would bring it home. And there'd be this enormous stack on my bed. And Sunday mornings were when I would just devote this time to reading. And so I would say that the first step in the career, and it's the advice I give people today, is learn your stuff, right? You have to have a there. You have to actually, build an area of expertise. And, the only way to do it is to do it and is to engage with it. Sometimes I say to, young advertising lawyers in my group, if you have a question that the client is asking you and you don't know how to answer it, I can probably give you the answer. Like I can probably tell you what the advice is that you need to give them. But if you want to be a really great advertising lawyer, you then need to say to me, yeah, but what cases is that based on? Or what statutes are you referring to there? Because I want to go and read them myself. Right. And I think often people don't take that step, right? They say, well, I can learn the black letter law. I can learn how to navigate that issue a little bit. But how deep are you willing to go? And I really, for me, the sort of beginning of my career and really it's continued is just really how deep can you go, right? And what is the depth? So I would say that was the first step. The first step was just building the substance, building the expertise, and really recognizing that it was a relationship building exercise, right? It was the first step was, you build the expertise, and the second step was how many clients can you get to know, right? Because
On your point about building the expertise, Jeff, there's an interesting reaction I had to it, which is, so I'm thinking back. I remember how young attorneys, when I was mentoring them, would think that the answer was relatively easy when you're looking at a piece of copy or trying to review something. And they would answer based upon what they thought as opposed to what the legal underpinning was. What was the case law? What was the statute involved and the like? And I used to stress to them all the time, your job isn't, I don't care about your opinion. What the client needs is to understand the legal ramifications and the legal basis for whatever advice you're giving them. The fact that you happen to watch TV and read magazines is irrelevant to me. You need to be a lawyer first and then a consumer second. And that's what you did. So you really got your arms around the principles involved, and then it sort of came easy. And then you were smart enough, obviously, to tell the young people to try to emulate that, as opposed to just, as so many young lawyers do, just figure they know it and it's not that hard and they're just going to take the easy road down the path of development. So that's I think that's great advice for the viewers. So then you did all that. You did that for a number of years.
so
Then you had
then
to start on building the clients. How did you go through that process?
so I would say step two was, again, it was saying yes. And yes, saying yes was about getting the experience, but I also think step two was really saying yes in terms of getting to know the clients, right? Because, the easiest way to build business is not to meet new clients and to try to come up with people out there in the world, particularly as a young lawyer. It's to build relationships with the people that all of the people you work with are introducing you to. And so I would say that really the next thing that I focused on, and again, it's the advice that I give the people that now work for me and work in my group, is, get to really know the people you're working with and build relationships with them and do good work with them. and then, really understand their businesses and understand what they're doing and learn as much as you can from them and build really strong relationships. Because number one, if you can keep the clients happy, they're going to come back to you. And I would say, so many, I mean, there are many clients that I work with now who, someone asked me to work on 25 years ago, and they're still clients today, or their successors are still clients today. And I think that just, building those relationships and not thinking about like what is mine, but instead of, how am I going to spend my time? Like I never once concerned myself with kind of initiation. Well, yes, of course, I concern myself with initiation every single day of my life, every single minute, every single day. But it was only one of the things I was concerned about. I mean, I was just as happy, and I'm just as happy today, right? If I've got some client that I'm working with, I don't care whose client it is. I just care that they're calling me and that they trust me and they want my help. And so, I think it was building relationships and really recognizing that every time a client called you, every time you got introduced to somebody new, you're suddenly building your career. And that the more of these people the more opportunities you have to not only build relationships with those clients, but to sort of expand your network. And, I have, one of the things I just think it is all about the substance, right? Like you have the expertise and then you get to work with actual clients who need your help and you do good work with them. You do good work with them and for them. And, you build those relationships and they trust you, and that just naturally leads to more work from them. And it also leads to more work out there in the world because these are going to be your influencers. These are going to be the people who tell their friends and they tell two friends and so on. And, suddenly these are the people who are out there saying, this is the person who I trust. And this is the person who knows his stuff. And this is the person who you should go to when you need help too. So I think that the easiest but most important and really difficult first thing that the lawyers have to do after learning your stuff is then just recognizing that, the first step is being fully engaged with the clients and recognizing that that is going to be the beginning of your business development journey.
Better advice couldn't be given, but you did a little bit more, Jeff. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm curious on your comment on this. You are one of the lawyers who I honestly can say built a brand. Jeff Greenbaum is a brand. And when he walks in the room, he commands the room. I mean, I've seen it countless times with you. You're a natural born leader and all those kinds. I don't want to build your ego too much because we used to be competitors, but we're not anymore. So I can say all sorts of nice things about you. Um, the the building that brand, you did that through a lot of additional effort. You didn't get the awards and the recognitions you've gotten because you just were a good lawyer. You were a marketer too. You were out there building your brand. And I wonder if you would just talk to us a little bit about how you built the brand of Jeff Greenbaum, because otherwise, I think it's safe to say that as good a lawyer as you are, there's probably another lawyer just as good as you out there somewhere. We're all commodities in many ways. We have to distinguish ourselves from all the others. We may think we're the greatest lawyer in the world, but the fact is we're probably not. And that there's other really good lawyers. But when you build a brand and you walk into the room, now you're distinguished before you even start with the first sentence and whatever you're going to do for the particular client. So how did you build the brand of Jeff Greenbaum?
Well, I think I have a lot to say there, but I think the first thing is I would say is I never saw my competitors as competitors. And I think that I saw these people who were these great people who were interested in the same things that I was interested in, and people I wanted to get to know and I wanted to build relationships with because we should be friends. We're interested in the same stuff and we should be collaborating. And there's unlimited numbers of clients out there in the world. And there's just no reason that we should be competing against each other. And so, I would say one of the first things that I did was I got to know all the people, I got to know all the people at my level and all the competitors. And some of this was intentional and some of this was just sort of organic. But I got to know all the people who did what I did. And for a couple of reasons. First of all, I wanted to be a part of a community, right? I wanted to have relationships with these people because these are the people who I'm going to be spending my career with. So that was number one. Number two, I wanted to have people to ask questions to. When I wanted to bounce an idea off, I wanted to be able to call somebody and say, hey, what are you guys thinking about over there? How are you approaching this issue? I wanted to feel like I was a part of a community. I also recognized that it had to be that all the people who are doing what I was doing are going to have conflicts and are going to need help on things and are going to need to bring other people in. And I wanted to be the person that they called. And so I knew that there was, for every reason, right, there was a benefit for me to get to know all those people. The second thing is I really, again, I really built naturally relationships with the people who I really saw as the leaders in the bar. And some of it was I just felt like, one of the things that was always most satisfying to me at my time at Paul Weiss, when I was working at Paul Weiss, you know, literally everyone in the hallway was famous, right? Like one person was more famous than the next. And, Senator so and so was here and Chief Judge so and so was over here. And, Arthur Lyman was over there. There were all these people, and it was like the opportunities to work with these people and to learn from them were just these incredible, incredible opportunities. So I recognized that, and I had some great people at Frankfurt to work with as well. But I also recognized there were other leaders in this advertising field who had a lot to share and were really great people, and I really got to know them too. And so I think that through professional associations, to me, I really felt like this was something that we were all in together, and I felt like it was always going to be helpful to me and good for me in my career, both personally and professionally, to sort of get to know these people and to sort of be collaborative. And I think that those relationships really paid off. Like if I look around to all of the people who were the people who I looked up at on stage, in year 4 or 5 of my career and said, I want to be like them. These are all people that I really consider to be friends today, and I feel like all were great mentors to me and were supportive of me in my career. And I think that, I think it's so counterintuitive to think of that your biggest competitors, the
Mhm.
people who, really don't need anything from you, don't want anything from you, and really are competitors. I look around and I go, every one of those people was an enormous supporter of me in my career and was a great part of my professional life. And so I really saw, I really, to me, I was never worried about, oh, we're competitors. I was never worried about who's going to get that client. I was never worried about that kind of thing. I always really felt like if I built a community and I built relationships, all the right stuff would happen. So to me, that sort of human piece of it in the community was another thing that was just really important to me. And then I'll talk about the other things, but I'll shut up for a
But
second.
no, that's okay. I just want to point out and I'll make an observation that I think is true of the advertising bar. I mean, I started out early in the game, earlier in the game. So the second generation of advertising
A
lawyers. The
lot
first,
earlier.
yeah, a lot earlier. Thank you. The first generation were people like Felix Kent and folks like that out there. But we had the three musketeers or the three stooges, as you may call them. It was me, Rick Kurnit, and Ron Urbeck. We were the same generation of advertising marketing lawyers, and we were good friends, and we would meet periodically. We never had a sense of the competition that you see so much in the bar today. We would go after the same kind of clients and stuff like that. But as you said, there were more than enough clients to share and move around and stuff. So it was no big deal, and we really were good friends, and we bounced stuff off each other all the time and the like. I worry that the advertising bar, as it's grown, and it's grown substantially since when I started, is beginning to look more like the more traditional kind of legal practices where the number of people who are of differing levels of competence, I'll be kind, are out there selling themselves, and it becomes less of a community and a more adversarial in sort of its environment. Are you seeing any of that?
Well, look, I think that the legal profession has changed a lot, right? And I think that partners move around a lot more. Um, you know, the demands are much more difficult. I mean, you think of just the pace of law, right? I mean, it used to be that, you'd get in the morning and there'd be these 3/4 inch videotapes that were arrived by messenger that you had to watch on the special 3/4 machine. And, you'd get your faxes and, you'd have time to review these things. And now everything, is instant and, there's just so much of it is different. So yeah, I mean, look, I think the profession is very, very different. And I think that it's, people interact with people very differently. But, from my perspective, I really, I feel like people are going to behave how they're going to behave, but I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I will say that like I think that when I talk to young lawyers about how you build a career and how you build a reputation, how you build a brand, the first question I ask them is well, first question I ask them is what are you interested in? Right? What is it that you really want to do? And what is the stuff that you're passionate about? Because I think that one of the things that clients like about me. I think it's one of the things that my partners like about me is I'm passionate about what I do. Like I really, it's not an, it's not an act, right? I'm actually doing the things that I like to do. And I think that if you're going to build a career in advertising law or whatever, wherever you're going to do it, you really have to pick something that, you're just actually happy to read about and learn about and talk about and be engaged with. And you shouldn't have work dread, right? You should feel like this is something I'm really passionate about. So the first thing I say is, find something you're really passionate about. Second thing I say is, figure out who you want to be, right? Literally go identify some lawyers out there that you want to emulate and start to understand a little bit of what it looks like in your career 10, 15, 20 years from now. And what does that career look like? And go, is that the career that I want? And then start to build a strategy kind of around that. And I would say that, you know, some of the things that I did that I thought were really important were, sort of identify the different types of communities that were out there that were the communities that advertising lawyers were part of, right? So, and one of the things that, you know, maybe is obvious, maybe is not to people, but was always very obvious to me is most people are not willing to put in the extra effort and most people are not willing to do it. And if you're willing to do it, you're gonna rise to the top, I think that, so like one of the first thing I did was I joined the Consumer Affairs Committee of the New York City Bar Association. And because I was like, well, look, I'm a lawyer. I should be a member of a bar association for all kinds of reasons. And if I join the Consumer Affairs Committee, this is a way to get to know people who do what I do, who do things that are related to what I do. And honestly, there are relationships that I built on that committee 30 years ago that I still have today. And really nice relationships. And ultimately I became chair of the committee and I built this program, which was the first program of its kind at the City Bar, which was an annual advertising law update, which I think I've literally chaired for 30 years. And, but part of it for me was saying, well, look, I'm going to join this committee. I'm going to build relationships. Then I'm going to reach out to people that I want to get to know and invite them to join the committee. And I'm going to host an annual panel and I'm going to figure out, well, who is it that I want to get to know? And I will invite them to be on my panel. And so I look at all of these things. I look at, when I talk about business development, I really talk to people about the idea that everything should have many functions and you should be thinking about all of the different ways and you can do this. So if I'm moderating a panel, right, there's marketing in that, which is, my name gets out there and I'm doing this thing, right? Then I'm preparing a presentation, so then I'm making sure I'm up to date on some specific topic, which then I'm going to use. Then I'm going to think about which clients are interested in this or which potential clients are interested in this and reach out to them and tell them that it's happening. Then I'm thinking, who are the people that I want to know in my career? And I'm going to reach out to them and ask them to be a part of it. So, it's no coincidence that, this panel every year features, someone from the Federal Trade Commission and someone from the New York State Attorney General's office and someone from the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs and someone from, where all the places where I want to know and have good, strong current relationships, right? So I'm thinking about how do I use these things to both do some good and educate people and build my own expertise, but at the same time, I'm thinking about this as a way, not only as a brand building exercise, but as a, business development exercise, expand my network exercise, things that are going to be useful to me in my career. And I kind of replicated that model again and again and again, which is I said, what's the kind of so then I said, Promotion Marketing Association. I was like, that is the place where everyone goes. And, I was tangentially involved, but, when I think it was Ron Goldbrenner retired and um, Ed Quebec became general counsel, I reached out to him. I mean, he just started. I was like, let's have lunch. Let's get to know each other. You're just starting. I'm a young lawyer. I want to get to know you. And, I just kind of got involved. And when people are willing to be involved and, you get involved in stuff. And then I was on committees and then I was on the board and then I was on the executive committee. And then, I was chair of the conference one year. And, I use this as an opportunity to both become a part of a community, there are all kinds of branding things you got to do because you got to speak at conferences and you got to write and you got to be members of committees and do all these things. But you also use it as an opportunity to bring other people in. And so, and I would say, I looked around and said, what are the associations that someone who is interested in the field that I'm interested in should belong to. And then I pick the ones, you can't do everything, right? And you pick a couple, you get involved in a few of them, and then you throw yourself all into them. And, I would say a big piece of advice that I always give to people is don't join a lot of organizations. Like, don't show up at a lot of stuff. Pick something and go deep, right? Like, there's showing up at the random conference every year. Okay, that's fine. But deciding that this is the association that I'm going to be committed to, and then I'm going to get involved in a committee, and then I'm going to be a part of the leadership in, and I'm going to organize something that I can use as a platform to tell people, what I'm about. That's what I did, and I just kept doing it, for with as much bandwidth as that I had to do it, and I just kept replicating that, and then, and I want to talk more about you getting other people involved too, because I think that's an important part of the.
Let me make a point
Yeah.
here, further to what you were just saying, that I think is really critical for younger lawyers to understand, is that what you did and what others who have built brands in this business have done is to have laser focus on what they were going to pursue, to dive into it, do all the work necessary for it, and to really then, volunteer and move forward and all those other good things. And what I say to the young lawyers is that, do you know how many lawyers actually do that in terms of the total population of lawyers? Very few, very few. So the opportunity is enormous if you are willing to take that commitment and just put your nose to the grindstone and then go through it, because you're going to be unique in doing that. And eventually, if I can sort of line up all the lawyers that I know who have done that, and they're all fantastic practitioners, have great practices, and they've left a bunch of people in the dust, not because they're necessarily better lawyers, but because they're more committed, they're more passionate about what they do, and they're willing to get out there up front and do it. Which brings me sort of to the next step, and I think you were referring to it when I interrupted you. That's about building a team and delegating and getting rid of the jealousy that so many lawyers have with respect to their clients. So I wonder if you might comment on that.
Well, I think that one of the things that was extremely influential to me, and maybe I'm not answering this question, but I will answer that question.
Okay, it's all right.
I think we were sitting on the beach in the Dominican Republic, and we were speaking on some conference, I don't know, about environmental marketing or something, and this is many years ago. And you were talking about business plans, and you were talking about how with every associate in your group, every partner in your group, you made them do a business plan and you held them accountable to it, and you made them think about these issues. And I was like, I remember, well, can you send that to me? Can I see what this looks like? Yeah, of course I'll send it to you, right? And this is, of course, exactly the kind of thing that we're modeling, which is like, no, of course I'm happy to share it with you. Like, this is good. I love you, whatever. And, it's this idea of it's not just about you, but it's about this sort of group effort. And one of the things that was really struck me in your business plan form was, and Doug's like, wow, he actually paid attention to this. And you said, who's gonna help you with this thing? Like, you've got this goal, and who are you gonna work with to get there? And whose help do you need to get there? And this idea that it is fundamentally a collaborative exercise is something I'm such a huge believer in and such a huge proponent of here. And so, on the business development front, right? The first step is figuring out what you want to do. And then the second step is hey, okay, I'm going to build this out and make this a group effort, right? So, I look at all of these events and I go, okay, this is I've established some, relationships here, I've built something here. Now, how do I get other people involved? And what opportunities can I create for people? And so one of the things that I really love is this idea of, okay, now that I've done this, or now that I've started to get involved in this thing, who can I bring with me? Who can I introduce to people? How can I introduce these people to other people? How can I then give them this platform? How can I turn these things over to them? And one of the things that really excites me is turning a small thing into a big thing. I I remember going to these early PMA conferences or ANA conferences or whatever they were at the various times and seeing these dinners that these firms would host. And we were never a firm that did that. Like it was always just it was not something we did. And I was like, Frankfurt Kurnit should do a dinner. Like we're a player here. Why aren't we doing a dinner? And part of it was because someone had to decide, hey, we should have a dinner and take responsibility for it. And I was like, look, we'll start small. Like, let's invite 4 people to dinner. We'll have a dinner. And then the next year we'll invite 8, right? And we just kind of did that. And I am really about let's build these things that are lasting things. And now we have a giant dinner every year. And I love looking at individual these things and saying, how can we build these things? How can we build a community? How can we get more people involved? And we went from these conferences where maybe 1 or 2 people from our firm goes to, 12 and I like speaking of that issue, and I want to talk about the client issue and the sort of ownership of client issue, the ownership of client issue too. But, one of the things I will say is that I think that it's so important for young lawyers to you know, be a part of this. I think that there's this instinct that business developers have and that law firms have to, worry about the dollar. Like, and I'm like, I don't want $5, right? Like that's not what I'm after, right? Like I'm after, clients who are going to entrust us with big, important, ongoing things that matter to them. Like I'm not trying to save $5. And I'm like, why aren't you bringing that associate to the conference? Like, oh, I don't want to spend the money. It's too expensive. I'm like, it's $1,500. Who cares? Like if that's what you're worried about, you've got bigger problems on your hands. I'm like, this is someone's career. Like this is somebody who you care about, who you're investing in as a lawyer. You want to bring them with you. You want them to have the experience and build a community and learn and meet the clients and meet prospective clients and be a part of this community. So we really make this major investment in saying someone wants to go to something, they can go, right? I mean, if there's a rationale for them to go, they can go. And we're just not worried about we want people to build full, kind of 360-degree careers. And in order to do that, you can't say to somebody, okay, now you're a partner, now it's time for you to build a practice. This is something that you have to start thinking about from day one and doing what's level appropriate through all that time. So a big part of the way in which we sort of bring up associates at our firm is we say to them, we want you to be fully engaged throughout all of your career, and we want you to be doing things that are level appropriate at all parts of your career. And that means, we do, for example, we do internal presentations, regularly. Every month we do it. And part of this is, getting associates comfortable with public speaking and getting them, how do you prepare a presentation? And again, it's that process of saying, I want you to talk about, you know, Rosca, I want you to go and build this expertise. You've been working on it, figure out a way to present it, and now present it to the firm in a way that people will find compelling, and you'll build an expertise. And we want people to do that. And then we take them to conferences and we make them speak at these conferences, and we do that. And so I think that part of this is just sort of saying, you have to make this a part of, you have to sort of set these expectations for people and really include them and then give them these opportunities and hope that they take advantage of them. I mean, I will say from a firm perspective, look, I think part of the problem is that, you know, it used to be that you came to a firm and you stayed there for your career, right? And that there wasn't this sort of sense of like partners were going to come and go and get lured away. And I think this sort of portability of a practice, like if you're a partner and you are kind of your primary focus is like how do I maintain the portability of my practice? Everything about it has to be, well, I can't have other partners involved. I have to be able to do it myself. I have to know everything about everything so that they only look to me for these things. And of course, these are the wrong answer to every question, right? Like what you want is you want to create a firm where people are not concerned about portability practice. You want to create a firm where people come and say, this is where I want to spend my career. And what I want to be focused on is this sort of group effort. And I think you have to, I think there's maybe beyond the scope of, what we're talking about here, but I think that it is a difficult thing, and it takes a lot of work to create a firm culture where people come to your firm or grow up at your firm, and there is nothing that is going to lure them away. Not money, not the promise of more resources, not I mean, look, I knew lots of people who do what I do, who were at great firms, who came to me and said, you could come to my firm, you have more resources, and you'd be able to do the client's bankruptcy work, you'd be able to do the client's this. And every time I was happy to have the delicious lunch and to see them. And like, no, I love where I am. And I think that, we are very focused on our special sauce here and building a culture where people do not think in that way. And so, there is, I don't spend one moment worried about who, that do I have the central relationship with
Mhm.
the client that maybe I initiated. I'm more focused on, how many people does this client know? And, is the client working with the right person for the right task? And are they getting good service, and are they getting the right advice? Knowing that, if the client is happy, that's the best thing for me and for the firm and for these other lawyers at the firm. And I think that, we really focus on, but I think that you can't get partners to do that unless they really believe that they're going to be there forever, and that the people who are working on their clients are also going to be
You'll be
there.
there forever.
Because
You know, it's
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying that's reflected, and I invite all of the viewers to take the time to go to your website and see this short documentary you have where you're talking about Mike Frankfurt's 80th birthday and whatever. That culture in that little video really shines through. When you're founded by people like him, and those are the sort of who begin the culture infusion into a firm, and then guys like you continue it, and Rick Kurnit continued it, and all those kinds of folks. That's why you have the glue you have within Frankfurt. And the other point I would make with that in terms of the jealousy, because having gone from a firm roughly that's 40, 50 lawyers, whatever it was, into the so-called big law, with 2,000 lawyers in my firm, I saw a lot of that kind of possessiveness of clients, and I saw so many careers uh, just sort of come to a plateau that there's no way you can build the kind of a book of business that big law expects you to develop unless you are willing to delegate and give away and all the rest of it. But that said, if you started off the right way that you talked about, where you built the underlying relationship first, it's far more difficult for a lawyer you've delegated to take that client, because you don't give up those relationships. That I had one client when I had a partner leave who took a chunk of business, or tried to take a chunk of business, and I called the client and said, I'd really, like for you to stay. And they said to me, hey, you're the glue I came here for. The fact that you delegated, that's fine, but you're the glue I came here for, so I'm staying. And so that partner who departed didn't get most of the work that they thought they were going to take. So it kind of goes hand in hand. If you build the relationships correctly, and then you delegate correctly, but don't give up those relationships, trust your partners, build and let your practice grows exponentially. That's a simple formula, but many lawyers are afraid to do that,
Yeah.
and I think your point about the mobility of the practice today, and sort of that philosophy that's permeating so much of it, particularly in big law where I was, it doesn't foster that as much as I wish it would.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in other firms like yours, it obviously does.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like, that's just not the way, I was just not the way I want to live my life. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm just gonna, I think that, I feel very, very lucky that there are these clients who I really enjoy working with and who have entrusted me with lots of great work. And, if the right, I'm gonna get the right lawyer at the right level to work on their matters. And I hope they build really great relationships with them. And I believe in the group endeavor, and I'm just, if someone leaves at some point, and it ever happens every once in a while, it's so
It
be it.
does. Yeah.
It's just, it is what it is. Like, I mean, I have to say, I had a litigation partner who was at the firm for a bunch of years. Ultimately, he decided to leave for the right reasons, and he'd done some great work for clients for many, many years, and you know. I was like, I hope they continue to work with you. You've done great work for them. You deserve to continue those relationships. Like, I'm just not going to begrudge like the great work that people have done and the great relationships they've built because I think that, sometimes this is not the right place for people. And sometimes this is going to be a platform that's going to make more sense for people. And that's for it too. And I feel like there's just enough work.
Exactly,
I'm
exactly.
just,
There's plenty of work, and over the years of my practice, I would occasionally have, a partner would leave, and they'd take a piece of my business or whatever it was, and other partners would say, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And I go, "I'm not going to do anything about it. If the client did choose to go with that person, then they're doing a good job for that client, and the client will remember me. I mean, I've got other work from that client, so." The fear factor of possessing your business, because so many law firms concentrate so much on origination and they have these metrics that completely lose the perspective of how you actually build a practice and that kind of thing, that it's really unfortunate in the profession. But I want to shift a little bit here in the time we have left to we've I think we've gone over the dawn really well here, and we've hopefully inspired a whole bunch of young people. But the time comes when you cross over the whatever you want to call it, and you have to start thinking about, as I like to call it, we all have a use by date, and whether we like it or not, we're going to get to it. And you're far from it at this point, but you've managed a law firm for now 15 years or more, and you've seen those transitions in your practice, and you've had to deal with them as an executive in the firm. So talk to us a little bit about that pressure, that philosophy, that and how you deal with that in communicating with lawyers who perhaps ought to be thinking about looking at something else.
so I think there's a couple things. First is, we are really committed to this sort of bringing a humanity to the practice of law. And we are really committed to people as they build their careers and as they wind down their careers. We want people to feel as respected, for the first 10 years of the practice as they do for the last 10 years of their practice. And so I think that, we really are making choices that sort of keep that in mind. And the beginning of the practice is about investing in people and about, really saying to them, we don't want you to worry about our commitment to you. We are committed to you. We're going to help you build this because this is why you're here. And then at the end of their careers, we want people to feel that we recognize their contributions and the different ways in which people contribute and the value that people bring. So we're really bringing that kind of philosophy to it. I think some of what drives our process is our compensation system. We created a compensation system, when I became managing partner, we created a new compensation system. This is now 15, 17 years ago. And part of that was to recognize all of the different contributions that people make in a law firm, both, financial and non-financial, and both, initiation related and non-initiation related, all the different ways in which people contribute to clients. And the sort of the idea that we really, one of the many ideas that we had at the time, one of the drivers of the system was that at different points of your career, you're going to contribute in different ways, right? When you're a junior partner and you don't have a ton of business, but you've got, all of the days, all the hours in the day to bill, you're going to be working really hard. You're going to be managing a lot of stuff. You're going to be supervising a lot of stuff, and you're going to get compensated for that. And then you're going to start to build more business and you're going to start to get compensated for that. And it's going to be offset a little bit like this. And then as you get older in your career or more senior in your career, you're gonna, presumably built this critical mass of relationships that, you're gonna continue to build business, but you're not gonna be working as many hours because, the way the work shifts and the way your needs shift. And so part of what we really try to do here is allow for people's compensation to reflect the different contributions that they make over time so that there's like a natural progression. And so, what we're looking for in a way is for people to feel like that they are compensated fairly for the types of contributions that they're making over the course of their career. So that, someone, some junior partner who's, billing crazy hours in the first 5 years to build all those relationships and to do all of those things, might be billing half as many hours, 30 years later in their career, but they're still getting well compensated because they've built this practice that they're now getting compensated for, and they've got these important relationships that they're compensated for. And so but part of what's happening there is that not only are people being compensated for all those different relationships, but people are also incentivized to bring other people in, right? Because if you want to build business, but you want to not work the same hours you did 20 years before, you need a great partner who's now going to be managing that relationship for you. And when you're a young partner who doesn't have the business, you want to but you're going to get compensated for taking
Mhm.
on this partner's work and you're building these relationships. But because everyone's contributions get recognized and get compensated, it kind of it builds into the system this sort of natural succession that happens just sort of over time, right? And
Right.
so as a result of that, if the system works well, and it usually works really well, right? By the time a partner is a more senior partner, that partner's got lots of clients and got great relationships and is doing a lot of the less day-to-day stuff on those clients. There's some that they might be doing, but as a result, there's other partners who've been brought up so that we're not we try not to have this. I mean, we try not to be in a place where suddenly we're like, oh my God, this partner's, getting more senior. It's time for the partner to retire. What are we going to do? No one knows any of those clients. Like we're trying to create a system where this is happening organically to everyone's benefit, including and most importantly the client, over time, so that that progression happens naturally. Now, I will say that we don't have a mandatory retirement age, right? We haven't created kind of any artificial lines in the sand where we're telling people, your best by date is over because, we look at this and we go, people have tremendous value to bring and different types of value to bring. And so instead, look, we meet with every partner twice a year and we review their plans and we review how they're doing and we review what their contributions are and we have honest conversations or I have honest conversations with them about like what makes sense. And at some point a partner's contributions, a partner might be 80 and making extraordinary contributions to the firm, and if so, that's amazing. And a partner may be 20 years younger than that and been like it's time. And so part of what we really do is we talk about it every year, right? And we talk about what do you want for your career? I mean, I don't care whether you're at the beginning of your career as a partner or at the end, every year we're saying, what's going on? What are your plans? What are you thinking? What do the next couple of years look like? And when a partner's contributions to the firm simply just don't, what usually happens with partners is that in our system and at our firm, partners, their careers often start to lead to a natural end, right? Like someone's, they start to slow down, they start to have less, they don't want to do as much. The clients, the fewer clients are coming in, and then we start to plan for that. We start to go, okay, what's a natural transition? And then there are other partners who are at the top of their careers, and they're like, I might be at the top of my career at age 70, but you know what? I only want to do it for 3 more years. And
Right.
then, in which case, we make a plan, and we figure out a natural transition that is fair to them and that sort of recognizes what the contributions they brought, but also really, keeps in mind like this is a client we've devoted all this time to. How do we make sure that we keep being there for them in the same way?
You know
After,
what's interesting, Jeff, is that what you're describing is unique among law firms. When I transitioned out of my prior firm, Reed Smith, I just assumed that there was a program there or there were programs everywhere, and I would just look into it. I was one of those guys who decided I'm done. I've done this for almost 50 years. I want to do something else. So I looked around and there was very little guidance out in the marketplace, except people who would teach you how to do, your estate planning, like get your affairs in order kind of crap. There was nothing that really talked to the how you deal with elder attorneys. And it struck me that what a terrible misuse of an asset, a very valuable asset that can be in the legal profession. And since I've now sort of my new career of consulting with law firms on transition and business development, I have seen how few law firms really have any kind of programs at all. And they just sort of hope it'll work out. And these are law firms that I have deep respect for that have these wonderful programs for other cohorts. They have them for, minorities, women, you name it, every single cohort you can think of. They do wonderful programs for them. But there's one cohort that I found almost zero attention to as a cohort in the legal profession. And that's what we're all going to be a part of, God willing, older lawyers. and what you do with them. It's like, some societies like the Native Americans and others, they look on their elders as being, great resources that deserve respect until well, always deserve respect. But you
Well,
don't see that in as much in the law as I thought I would see. So when I hear programs like you're doing at Frankfurt Kurnit, I just, that's terrific. I mean, it's and you should be very proud of doing that, because I got to tell you, there's a lot of law firms that just sit there and wait. And part of it is, I think, that they're almost afraid to approach the senior lawyer who in a way their respect for that person is really counterproductive, because they're almost afraid to sit and go, hey Doug, it's toward the end, what do you want to do? And you're doing those twice a year business planning sessions is a great, just a simple step that can have that conversation. Most law
well,
firms, they just that doesn't exist.
well, it really struck me, and in your book, and you talk about the dust part of it. I think that one of the things that really struck me was kind of this sort of lack of didn't feel, people need to feel respected in the process. And, I look at this and I go and I walk down the hall and I go, every single person here, in one way or another, we have a relationship with. And, certainly if a partner's in the range of their retiring, this is somebody I have a long relationship with. And so, these are not hard conversations to have. These are easy conversations to have, because I'm like, what do you want to do? How, I mean, often, I will tell you, and I'm not exaggerating, partners retiring and they want to retire in a couple of years. And I say, what do you want your deal to look like? Because it's not set forth under shareholder agreement. There isn't a fixed way to do it. I say, what do you want your deal to look like? And they tell me, and almost always I say, yeah, that's fine. Right. Because this is a relationship and we come up with something that everyone understands makes sense. And I think that, that kind of focus and attention on it and treating people like human beings in the relationship, really makes an enormous, enormous difference. But I do think it is a willingness to be able to talk about it. And look, I'm very transparent about it. I I send this during the pandemic. I started to send a weekly email out to everybody at the firm, just sort of talking about what's going on at the firm that week and what are we thinking about and what things they need to know about. And when the pandemic was officially over and we're back to work, I stopped. And because we're all back in the office, and people said, no, 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 you have to continue. We love this email. And so what I use this email to do is to model behavior, right? Like I'm not afraid to tell people, hey, I'm going to be on vacation for the next 2 weeks, right? I'm not doing that so they know they don't send me work. I'm doing that so they know that it's okay to take vacation, right? And, in the same way that I'm completely transparent with people that I've been managing partner for long enough, right? Like I told people, a year and a half ago that I'm going to stop in 3 years, and we're going to use this 3-year period to plan for the transition and to come up with succession plans and to do this. And this is stuff that, I'm just, is coming from me, and I'm extremely transparent about with not only the partners, but with the entire firm, because I want people to see that we're thoughtful about these issues. And I want people to actually be a part of that process in the way in which they're seeing, okay, here's who the successors are going to be. This is how the training's happening. This is how they're getting involved in these things. And I think that doing these things, is extraordinarily important. But I think it's about modeling the behavior, right? It's not saying, hey, I'm going to be a partner. I want to hold on to this client relationship.
Right, right.
Or I
And
want to hold.
one of the points you're making that's really critical is that it takes time. It's a multi-year commitment. And again, I think most law firms don't appreciate that. So they either start too late or they don't start at all. So firms that actually have those kinds of conversations, and they are not hard conversations. I was a big, producer at Reed Smith and whatever it was, and the managing partners were younger than me, but they were almost tepid to come into me and talk to me about this until I went to them and said, hey guys, we're going to do this. And then the conversation was simple. It goes on that, but having that time frame in mind as to how long that's going to take is critical to having it be successful. And again, I found in the counseling that I've been doing that many law firms just are afraid of the conversation. They don't give it enough time, and then all sorts of things unravel or whatever it is. But it can be an unpleasant experience. Last point, and I want to make one observation and hear from you. Again, I urge viewers to watch that little documentary on your website. It's great. It was very clear to me that Mike had other interests. He was not a one-dimensional, all I'm going to do is practice law kind of guy. So when it came time for him, and there was some references in it, and I did a little bit of research on him. He did a lot of stuff that was secondary interest in running and other things that he did, and wonderful charitable efforts and stuff. So he had it down. He had it figured out. You got it figured out? What's Jeff Greenbaum's next chapter?
It is funny. I mean, I think that, for me, you know, I part of the problem that we have at this firm right now, and I'm not tooting my own horn or whatever, is we're all kind of settled into me doing this job, right? And I think that I recognize that that wasn't the best thing, right? It's it was, I've been managing partner for 15 and a half years, and I was like, it's important, and we're very focused on succession at this firm. I mean, if you look at the practice group leaders around the firm, every practice group leader has a next generation lawyer as one of the
Mhm.
practice group leaders because we're extremely focused on the next generation. And if you look at our management committee, at least half of it's made up of really next generation partners. And I just realized it was just hugely important for us not to go the next 5 to 10 years with, the same old guy doing the thing that he's been doing in the same way. But really, it's important for people to see that we can transition and we can have somebody else and we can do it and we can do it. And also that it was really important to me. Like, look, I put almost 30 years into this firm. I want to be around practicing law for long enough to help the next generation with that transition. And it was important for people. I wanted to model that too. So for me, I'm really looking at, like, I love being an advertising lawyer. Even though I was managing partner, I was still practicing law full time. And as a result, I was doing two jobs, which is a lot. And I'm kind of really, one of the decisions I made was I wanted the sort of the last chapter of my career, the last 10 years of my career, say, to be practicing advertising law without all of these other giant administrative demands. And so for me, as I thought about the transition, what I really thought about was, okay, I've got to help this firm transition to the next generation of leadership, be here to support them. I also, I'm also stepping down at the end of the year as chairman of the Global Advertising Lawyers Alliance. And again, I did that for 12 years. And it was really this decision to me to saying, look, here's this organization that you founded and that you entrusted me with and that I absolutely love. And it's one of my favorite parts of my professional career. But I really said, like, look, it's important for Gallo to also see that, this organization is going to continue on really strong with somebody else. And I need to be there to support that. And I really want to do that. But I really also wanted to give myself this sort of chapter of, hey, I'm going to be an advertising lawyer and keep doing what I'm doing without all these other demands, so then I can start to create some space in my life to think about what are the other things that I haven't had as much time to do that I want to do. And because I think that, look, someday I'm going to retire. I'm not going to be, knock on wood, one of the people that dies at my desk. And but you have to create some space for planning. And so I'm definitely very, very much in that place of what are the other things I want to do and how do I want to spend my time and how do I get to do more of the things that I want to do while still being fully engaged in the practice of law. And I think that this is now about, Jeff 3.0, whatever it is, about what does it look like 10 years from now? And,
Yeah.
have I created this environment of here's the stuff that I like to do and have that sort of follow naturally as well.
So, I mean, I wish all the lawyers that I've spoken to had that kind of planning, forward-looking outlook that you do. It's incredibly healthy and it's just the only way to go. And then surprisingly, not many lawyers have that perspective. So, give you the last word. Any last things you want to say to the viewers about young lawyers, old lawyers, any lawyers?
You know, I think that the thing that has been the most one of the most important things for me and part of my process is just not being afraid to be introspective about it and sort of saying, what's working, what's not working, what's making you happy, what's not making you happy. There's one partner who's like miserable all the time. And I keep going into his office and being like, this is your life. Like, this is actually your life. Like, it's not worth it. Like, figure out what's making you unhappy and fix it. And I think that too often people kind of let their careers happen to them as opposed to kind of saying, this is how I want to spend my days. This is what I want to be an expert in. This is who I want to work with. This is the type of work that I want to do. These are the kinds of things that I want to be really engaged in. And I think that, if we don't constantly look at ourselves and say, even as something as simple as, look at how you build your time today. Did you use your time wisely? Like, is that how you wanted to use your time? And if not, figure out how to do it differently. And I think that if we keep sort of challenging ourselves and asking ourselves those questions, and the baseline is like, not to be all Marie Kondo or whatever, but is it giving you joy, right? Like, because if
Well,
it's not, you should clear it out and figure out what makes sense. Because
yeah,
honestly,
I always say to attorneys that you don't live to work, you work to live. And if you've got that upside down, then you're going to be a miserable human being. Well, thank you, Jeff. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Although I could talk to you like for hours as we have in various times in the past. But thanks very much for being a guest today. I think we've given the viewers a lot to think about, and hopefully they will. And I look forward to seeing you sometime, maybe at a gala meeting somewhere in some exotic place in the world.
all right, thanks for having me, Doug.
Thank you for joining us on the Dawn to Dusk podcast. You can learn more on building and transitioning a multi-million-dollar law practice in Doug's book, From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. If you're interested in working with Doug, suggesting future guests, or have questions you'd like Doug to ask guests in upcoming episodes, reach out to him at douglas.wood@wood.law. Or visit his website at dawntodusk.wood.law. And if you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your peers. Until next time, we appreciate your viewership.